Welcome to worship this morning at Middleton Community United Church of Christ, where we say that no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. I'm the Reverend Zayna Thomley, and I'm so glad that you have chosen to worship with us this morning, whether you are joining us here in the sanctuary or from the comfort of your own home. It is good and right when God's people gather together. Got a few quick announcements as we prepare for worship this morning. First, this week and next week, we'll be celebrating Undies Sunday and invite any donations of new underwear, bras, t-shirts, socks, undershirts that you can bring to be donated to Way Forward resources. I was told this week that the last time we had Undies Sunday, which we do about twice a year, our donations were taken to Way Forward for their clothing closet and were gone within a day. So that is how in demand new items like this are. So anything that you can bring is appreciated and needed. This week, Adult Games and Crafts will be meeting to play games from 10:30 to noon in Fellowship Hall. All are welcome. Bring a friend. There's usually snacks, I understand. So come and be together there. Many of you know that a few years ago we stopped holding trunk or treat here at Middleton Community Church because our friends over at the newer Pope Farm Elementary held one that we did not want to compete with. Their trunk or treat is coming up on Friday, October 24th, and we are invited to help provide candy for that event. They see some 500 or 600 kids come through, so we need a lot of candy. If you would like to make a donation, you can bring it to the church and we'll make sure that it gets over there. They're also looking for people to host trunks, so if you miss hosting a trunk here at MCC, I'd really encourage you to help our friends over at Pope Farm Elementary. There's a flyer on the bulletin boards when you're coming in to the church today with a sign-up sheet there if you would like to volunteer in any other way besides bringing candy. Finally, we will have a membership class on Sunday, October 26th after worship. If you have been worshiping with us for a while, if you're interested in asking questions or learning more about what it means to be a member at MCC, I'd encourage you to join us then.
Today's reading is from the book of Acts, chapter 20, verses 7 through 12. It's not a well-used story from the Bible, so this may be new to some of us. On the first day of the week, when we met to break bread, Paul was holding a discussion with them. Since he intended to leave the next day, he continued speaking until midnight. There were many lamps in the room upstairs where we were meeting. A young man named Eutychus, who was sitting in the window, began to sink off into a deep sleep while Paul talked still longer. Overcome by sleep, he fell to the ground, 3 floors below, and was picked up dead. But Paul went down and, bending over him, took him in his arms and said, "Do not be alarmed, for his life is in him." And then Paul went upstairs, and after he had broken bread and eaten, he continued to converse with them until dawn, and then he left. Meanwhile, they had taken the boy away alive and were not a little comforted. This ends our reading. May we be blessed with new understanding.
So this morning is our third out of four Sundays hearing from four different preachers about stories that are maybe lesser known from the Bible. And when the four of us, Andrew, Rachel, Lawrence, and I started talking about this several months ago, we set out to brainstorm and pick stories that we each wanted to preach about. And I have to admit that I mostly picked this story because I thought it was funny, right? This story about Paul preaching so long that some guy falls out of a window because he is so tired. But then when it came to actually planning worship around it, it became a lot harder. I had to think, why is this story here? And why are we telling it? And what is the good news? And by the end of this week, as I stand before you today, I have fallen so in love with this story that I think it should be in the lectionary, and I don't know why it's not. So let us reflect on this story together. I'd invite you to join me in prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, for you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Now, I'm not going to preach an entire sermon about sleeping in worship, though I probably could, but I'm reminded in my first call there was a really faithful member. She was one of those members of the church who did everything, right? There are a few of these in this room, retired people who don't know how to be retired, in that she was always really busy. She was always working hard. She also had retired to a little farmette, and so she, was taking care of things early in the morning before church and often late at night. And she and her wife always sat in the back row of worship, and she had her eyes closed through the whole thing. Every week, without fail, her eyes were closed. And for the first few months I was there, every week she would come up to me to make sure I knew that she wasn't sleeping, right? Like, it was really important to her. I just want you to know I'm not sleeping. I'm just listening deeply to what you have to say. And I don't know which is true. I suspect that every once in a while that she was sleeping. And I meant this when I told her with my whole heart that it was okay, that if what she needed when she came into this space was to close her eyes and to rest fully and deeply into this community and into the love of God, that I would not take offense to her sleeping in that hour. So if you do need a nap this morning, please take it. Make sure that you're balanced and stable before you do. But let's talk about Eutychus. It had been a really long night in Troas, in this small town along the sea where Paul and Luke and others had gathered to teach about Jesus, to help this small new Christian community as they learned about the way of God in this world. I imagine that as the lamp flickered and the room got more crowded, that the heat and the aroma of the lovely meal that was being prepared lingered in the air, that Paul just kept talking. He knew he would be leaving soon. We're told that he was preparing to leave in the morning, but he still had so much to say, so much love and urgency to leave with this little community trying to follow Jesus in the middle of an empire that did not understand what they were trying to do. And in the corner, on the windowsill, a young man named Eutychus fought to keep his eyes open. We've all been there. A late meeting, a long sermon, a tired body. When I was still in school, it was always that lecture that took place right after lunch, right? Like the 1:30 class. No matter how interested I was in the subject, my body yearned for sleep at that hour. And for Eutychus, sleep eventually won. He nodded off, slipped out the window, and fell 3 stories to the ground. When they reached him, the text says he was picked up dead. And there are 100 corny jokes that I could tell here, even more, about Eutychus dozing off during church. But this story isn't actually about a bored teenager. It's about a weary body. It's a story about a community trying to stay faithful when the night feels long, when the air feels heavy, when the world feels too much. This is a story about what happens when exhaustion catches up to us, and about a God who meets us even there. Acts says that the believers met on the first day of the week to break bread. Nothing grand, no temple, no liturgy, no pomp or circumstance, just an upper room filled with lamps, filled with people, filled with food, a small, ordinary act of faithfulness in a world that did not honor small or ordinary acts. And that's where the church lives most of the time, even now, 2,000 years later. It exists in ordinary gatherings. At our best, we fill our hours showing up for meetings, for prayers, for meals, for one another. We talk and pray and hope, sometimes past midnight, though not often, and I am grateful for that, trying to make sense of what it means to be faithful in a world that keeps breaking hearts and bodies. And I imagine, like that church in Troas, we too are often tired. Tired of watching violence unfold again and again. Tired of injustice that seems to regenerate faster than we can resist it. Tired of systems that tell us some lives matter more than others. Tired of schedules that seem overburdened and beyond our control. Tired of careers that call on us to aim for promotion rather than wellness. The upper room where this church gathered can feel like a fragile place to hold hope. The sanctuary can feel like a fragile place to hold hope when we all come in with this kind of exhaustion. But it's where the Spirit gathers us anyway. Eutychus's fall isn't a failure of faith. It is simply a sign of being human. Are any of you human? I'm human. He represents all of us ready to fall out the window from sheer exhaustion, who can't hold on any longer. And it's not just individuals. Communities fall too. Churches fall. Movements fall. We lose our grip on joy. We lose sight of the promise. We forget what the struggle is for. But the good news is this. This story doesn't end with Eutychus falling out the window. When he hits the ground, Paul doesn't scold or sermonize. He runs. The community runs. Paul runs down the stairs and throws himself over the young man and gathers him up into his own body. And this is the part of the story that has taken my breath away. Paul doesn't stand above Eutychus's brokenness. He enters it. He wraps his arms around death itself, and through that embrace, life returns. That's resurrection work. I'd venture to say it's the church's work. The book of Acts that we hear from, that this story is in, is a story of the early church. And for generations, it has been the story, the writings that we go back to ask ourselves, what are we doing here? Why is it that we do this thing called church? We are the body that rushes down the stairs when someone falls, when a life is cut short, when despair takes hold, when injustice crushes another soul. We are called to hold the fallen. We must refuse to let death have the last word. The world teaches us to step over or around what is broken. The gospel teaches us to stop and to bend down and to touch and to hold and to embrace. Then, after the fall and the embrace, what's really wonderful is that this church, this tiny new learning church, goes back upstairs. And they finally break bread, and they eat together, and Paul keeps on talking until dawn, it says. This is such a quiet resurrection. You'll notice that it happens before the sun comes up, in the same way that the resurrection of Jesus on Easter does. But there is no trumpet blast, no fanfare, just a community that keeps going. They return to the table where it all started, because that is where resurrection always leads us. That is what it means to be Easter people, to return to shared bread, to return to one another. The text ends by saying, they were not a little comforted, which is a strange translation. And if you read other translations, it says they were greatly comforted, right? In that what Luke is trying to say here is that they were more than a little comforted by this. They were filled with hope again. When I read this story, I think about how many people in our world are sitting right on the edge of the windowsill of despair, trying to stay awake to all the pain without being overwhelmed by it. People worn thin by grief. People who are trying to do the work of peace in the world that keep shouting, war, war, war. People who keep showing up for others even when their own hearts are tired. And I think the gospel speaks to us the same way Paul spoke that night, by showing us that even in exhaustion, God's Spirit still brings life. The words keep showing up. The world may wear us down, but the gospel keeps rising, sometimes through miracles, sometimes through one another's arms, sometimes just through the courage to stay in the room and to break bread and to wait once again for dawn. In a little bit, we're going to sing a hymn that I think is new for many at MCC. I was really grateful to hear the choir practicing it this morning because it can be a little hard to catch on to, but it's really fun once you do. It's titled in our hymnals, Lead Us from Death to Life, but the alternative title is the World Peace Prayer. And it traces this same journey from the story of Eutychus. Lead us from death to life, from falsehood to truth, from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Eutychus's fall is a story of death, falsehood, and despair and fear, but the church's response, the running, the holding, the bread breaking, that is the story of life, truth, hope, and trust. And this is the story that the church is called to tell in the world again and again and again. The world tells the story of death and falsehood and despair and fear and says it is the only way. And we must show up to proclaim the way of life and truth and hope and trust. We'll go on to sing, lead us from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, let peace fill our world, let peace fill our universe. That's an invitation to the Spirit still moving among us, teaching us to be people of compassion, even in a weary world. Still all the angry cries, still all the angry guns, still now your people die, earth, sons and daughters. And that's our reality too. We know that the angry cries have not stopped, that the guns have not gone silent. And yet God's children keep gathering, keep breaking bread, keep believing that justice will roll and mercy will pour down. When we sing, we aren't escaping the pain of the world, we are naming it. And we are daring to believe that the embrace of God's love is stronger. The last verse ends, we can be love, we can bring peace, we can still be your way of compassion. That's exactly what the church in Troas discovered that night. They didn't just witness a resurrection, they embodied it. They became the way of compassion for one another. And that is our calling, to be people who rush to the side of the fallen, who lift up what has been cast down, who keep holding each other through the nights until the morning comes. So friends, if you are weary, and I imagine that some of you are, if the struggle for justice feels endless, if you are so overwhelmed by grief that you're not quite sure which step to take next, or if you've nodded off on the windowsill, hear this good news. God is not done with us. God is not done with this world. Resurrection is still happening in small rooms, on street corners, in tired hearts, in living rooms, and in this very community. When we fall, Christ comes running. When we gather, Christ breaks bread with us. When we sing, Christ breathes peace through our lungs. And when we finally walk back into the world, rested, held, renewed, we carry that spirit of compassion with us. So let us sing as a prayer and as a promise. Lead us from death to life, from falsehood to truth, from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead us from hate to love and from war to peace. Let peace fill our world. Let peace fill our universe. And in those words, might we all find resurrection and truth and life this day. We respond to the grace and the good news of God with an invitation to generosity. And for that, today I'm going to invite Brooke DeRivers, who is our moderator-elect and also the lead of our generosity team, to come up and speak to you about the new generosity theme that will lead us into the year ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're excited to introduce our 2026 generosity theme. You can see it on the screen there. But to fully tell its story, I'd like to go back 2 years. 2 years ago, around the same time of the year, I came up here and introduced our stewardship campaign. This was back when we asked for your pledge. We asked what you would be donating for the year ahead. And amazingly, those pledges came in, and we balanced our budget, and we had a wonderful year. 1 year ago, I was up at the podium, probably same time of year, and we introduced our generosity campaign. And I talked about NPR and the new options that you could continue to put in a pledge, or you could become a sustaining giver of MCC. And amazingly, we exceeded our goal that year. It's allowed us to expand our staff and our programming and our influence on our community this year. So this year, we kind of have two paths. We have one for our congregation that prefers to pledge, and another for our sustaining giver. And our theme this year came out of something that Pastor Zayna had said when she first joined us as our called pastor. It could have been in response to our overflowing laundry basket for Undies Sunday, or our overflowing basket at the fellowship table. For each ask at this congregation, Pastor Zayna was amazed at the generosity of this congregation. She thought, well, there has to be a limit, right? There has to be that one ask that puts things over the top. But it hasn't. Each time there's been a need, MCC has responded with generosity. And that's led us to our theme this year of be hopeful, be generous, and be amazed. This year, if you are a sustaining giver, we ask you to log in and consider increasing your pledge. This year, if you prefer to put in a pledge, we ask you to prayerfully consider what next year looks like for you. And if you're more of a spontaneous giver, we ask you to try to think of what that might look like, because we are challenging ourselves for this generosity campaign for a 5% overall increase and a 5% increase in givers. So with that, this is your formal invitation to join us in our generosity campaign and be hopeful for a more just and generous world for all God's people. Continue to be generous with your voice, your hands, with the blessings bestowed upon you, and to continue to be amazed by God's work. You heard about miracles in scriptures today, the stories that have been handed down generation after generation. Be amazed by God's work in Middleton, Wisconsin, through this church. Be amazed that needs continue to be met. Thank you.
Of this community. And I want to note that when we have been talking about this theme, that needs get met here at MCC, not just financially, not just in donations, but when someone is in need of companionship or someone to share a meal, that those needs get met immediately and overwhelmingly as well. And so thank you for all of the ways that you continue to give and to support the work here at MCC. If you brought an offering with you today, you can give that as you leave the sanctuary. Right out the first set of doors, there's a couple of wooden boxes on the wall, or at any time at middletonucc.org/give. If you are a member of the congregation, you should have received an email this week with information about the generosity campaign, but you can also find that on our website, middletonucc.org/generosity. Friends, let us stand and sing together, raise our voices in hope and praise one more time.
Lead us from death to life, from falsehood to truth, from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead us from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, let peace fill our world, let peace fill our universe. Still all the angry cries, still all the angry guns, still know your people die.
Friends, I am grateful for the chance to worship and to gather here in this room, whether that is physically or via our live stream today, for it is good when we gather. As you go, may God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May God look upon you with kindness and give you peace today and every day. Amen.